Hey, folks, it's SVT time. We're live. Welcome, everyone from around the world. It is Tuesday. It is SVT time. Like I said in my post, and I think Ampeg actually posted this, that we were going to have a very special guest on today. And lo and behold, Sean Hurley is here to join us. And we've got a few things out. There's a couple of reasons why Sean is here to join us. Obviously, because we love Sean and we wanted Sean on for quite a while, but because of schedule and whatnot. But anyways, just real quick, Dom is somewhere in Nashville in a recording studio, and he's desperately trying to find a Wi-Fi spot. So he'll be dialing in. Here in a second. So, but in the meantime, Sean, man, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for keeping the door open so I could just knock in at any time and say, hey, let's do this. Thank you for having me.
The door is always open, my friend. I know,
Much
you know,
appreciated.
Here's Dom here. Let me add him.
Speaking of open doors.
What's up?
What's up, Sean?
We got the sunshine. I
wouldn't
like
miss
it.
this for the world, but hopefully my internet behaves. So
I'm sure
we'll
it
take
will.
care of you. Yeah, we put out the feelers. We made sure the lines were open, didn't we? Didn't we, Dino?
We absolutely did.
Right on.
I'm so jealous. It's like Dom's in Nashville doing an album. Sean, I'm sure at some point today you're going to be in the studio doing something, right?
Yeah, I've got some things, but it'll be my home studio, so I'll still be able to get out and get some sun and walk the dog and
do
some things. Yeah,
and
I'm jealous of Dom. Look at it.
We got some sun
hanging with us, man.
And I will be here in my little Hubble abode in southern New Hampshire, freezing.
You'll have the sheep to keep you company, though.
Hey, be careful when you say that to a Greek boy. No holds barred here, by the way, Sean. It's like
we're not doing this. We won't edit for the family. We'll keep this, loose and cool.
We're not shy here. Hey, by the way, Dom, so ironically, I was just looking it up. This is our 75th episode.
Whoa.
And it just happens to be that we're celebrating our 75th anniversary.
Heck yeah.
And we also have Sean on board here because today launched the Vertex Effects video. And I'm going to show some clips from that too, if that's cool with everybody watching.
Cool.
Man, I got to tell you, it's a 2-hour video. It's on their YouTube channel. We'll post links and everything. And I watched the whole thing. And normally, like,
you're still awake.
Well, that's just like for most people don't have a 2-hour attention span, especially
you got that right. Yeah, exactly.
But honestly, like I learned a lot about. I thought I knew enough about you and your history and your career, but I learned even more and even more valuable. Like you shared a lot of like really invaluable tips and tricks on what you use in the studio. And
Mason, he just opened it up, and I thought it would be cool to actually bring all the basses that I use, because I decided long ago that I would not sell any of my basses. And then once I started using them and making money, I was like, oh, these will be really nice to keep, even if they fall out of favor. So I got into it. I brought all the basses that I actually used, even dating back to over 25 years ago. I still have some of that gear.
Man, yeah, and I will say this. Anybody that watches this video, it's going to cost you some money because you're
gonna buy stuff.
You're gonna buy stuff. And before I watched the video, Sean, I had texted you after this too. I was like, I had my eye on a 65p bass. And after I watched the video, I would the next day I went over to the store to check out the 65p bass, and of course start talking numbers with the gentleman about the 65p bass. And I haven't bought it yet, but
it's gonna happen.
It's got to happen.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's inevitable. So, anyways,
kind of a cool story about that. When I first met Sean, when I first got to LA, I was playing a show at the Whiskey, and Sean, you were playing. I forget what group it was, and just a very cool moment of like, for me, it was like, oh my gosh, one of my bass heroes. This is amazing. and you're super kind. And then I think you busted out your 60s P, and you were like, hey man, like, check this out. Feel free to play it. Let me check out what you got going. And it was just like such a cool kind of like I've never had anybody instantly be that kind and then also be like, hey, here's my gear, check it out. But it's so cool now to see, anytime I see an ad for your custom shop bass, I'm just like, that is so cool, because I'm pretty sure it was like modeled after that one.
Yeah, exactly. I was excited to have that bass, so that's why I was like, hey man, check this out. And then Fender copied it, but I still have the CD you gave me.
No way.
That night. Oh yeah. I can't play it, but I still have it.
That's amazing. Oh, that's funny.
You never gave me a CD.
Great night. I know. I gave them all to Sean.
He smashed them all, but I saved them. Like I said, I don't sell basses. I don't get rid of CDs. I keep it all.
That's amazing.
And you know what's funny about that too, Sean? You bring up a great point, because we've all bought and sold like we sold gear to fund other gear purchases. And I was down here with my wife, and I'm looking at like basses that I've had for quite a long time that I don't really use anymore, but are worth some money. And I'm like, well, you know what? I could probably get some. And she's looking at me. She goes, isn't that the bass you took to Japan? Like when you first time you went on tour? Like, I was like, yeah, I really can't sell that.
Yeah.
What about this amp? Well, isn't that the amp that so-and-so sold you? And like, they're no longer with us. I can't sell it. And everything that we collect just has right in here. You know what I mean? It's like becomes a part of the family. So So needless to say, I'll be donating pints of plasma, and
that's what it is. That's what I say. Like, you'll find a way to make the money, but if you sell the bass, you'll be, oh man, I wish I had it. But just pick up cans or sell blood or do whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I get that.
Where there's a will, there's a way, and you'll be glad. Like, I'm really glad for it years later, because there's times like, man, I'm never playing this thing. And years will go by, but it's fun to have. And then once the gray hairs start popping up, it's like, oh yeah, it becomes a little more meaningful. And then maybe you'll play it. Like, fashion changes, so maybe what we think is the coolest thing might still evolve and change, and maybe one of those basses you had, and then you'll be really glad you have it.
I don't know if my 8-string BC Rich bitch is actually going to come back in style, though. That's the only.
Pretty much not going to.
And even if it does, I'm not getting back in that
you're not the guy to play it. Yeah. Gotta hire an 18-year-old.
Gotta get the colored strings on it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So some things are not timeless. That's especially for us guys that came up in the 80s. There are a couple things that can stay in the Wayback Machine.
Speaking of the 80s, like in this video, you talked about your beginnings here in here I'm in New Hampshire, but in Massachusetts. And I did not realize that oh my God, Vertical Horizon was from Worcester. Like I had no idea.
Right. It didn't feel, it wasn't that traditional, like, hey, Aerosmith is from Boston, and like certain bands inhabit a city. But Matt Scannell, who's the leader of the band, he and his partner Keith Kane, like, they met at Georgetown, which is in the DC area. So they got their start sort of hubbing out of their college town. But because when they retreated, like, you get out of college, you go back home, Worcester was Matt's home. So the hub, like the audition that I did, was in Mom's basement in Worcester. So everything sort of hubbed out of Worcester, although they would have, probably not been able to draw more than 20 people at a Worcester club. It wasn't like they were hitting the club scene all the time, but it made it real easy when they were looking for a bass player. They were searching into Boston, and the drummer, Ed Toth, was living there. I still have the cassette he gave me. It's got a Boston number on it with the audition tunes, but it just was fortuitous, because other than that, there's not much that comes out of Worcester that then goes to the national stage. So I didn't believe it was the thing. A buddy of mine told me that, hey, Matt is from Worcester, and he's living in New York City now, but he hubs out of his mom's place, and they got a record deal with RCA. And I'm like, nope. It's not possible. Wow. No one from Worcester can get a record deal.
Yeah.
But it was true.
And like you said, anybody that knows the area, I mean, you are so close to Boston that, most of the Boston bands at the time were garnering a lot of the exposure, if you will,
Right. Yeah. It
you know,
rarely would, like, we would do, if you lived in Boston and you're trying to work, you would go out to Worcester to play, but nobody was. I had a lot of friends that came from Worcester, and as soon as they could, they would move to Boston because it's just, it's like a different area code. It's 617 versus
yeah,
508. And
yeah,
I remember being told by Boston friends, because I grew up in 413, and they were like, yeah, as soon as we see an ad for 413, they like shut it down. They had no interest in venturing that far west. And
yeah,
Worcester was similar, we're joking about it, but I wouldn't consider, I considered moving to Boston or New York. Worcester would have been not even in on the radar. And
yeah,
just to hear that a band, back in the day, like, the only way to success was getting a record deal.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
no Instagram, there was no way to get yourself out there other than a daily slog of clubs and booking. So nobody really did it from anywhere close to where I grew up. And to hear Worcester, it's like, how is
yeah,
that possible? But it was, and it
yeah,
made it
Yeah.
very easy, because I drove over to Worcester to the audition, and then that's
that's
how I
wild.
got my foot in the door to what I finally learned was, oh, the real music business. It's a
Right.
different beast once you're dealing with managers, labels, promotion people, with a bigger infrastructure.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
that deal, you think, was it the buzz of the band? Was it the song that kind of
They
the catalyst?
no, I think it was before the songs were written, which probably would have garnered a deal. The
Yeah.
band had been out there slogging it in the old-fashioned way, where they had opened up for groups, then started headlining, and they had done independent records. So they had built up a fan base, and at that time, between their 3 independent records, they had sold, the figure I was told was 70,000 copies of CDs, which was a big deal. It was a
Yeah.
lot. It was kind of up and down the East
Sure.
Coast. So labels were looking for that kind of appeal, and then they send out their A&R people, and if you're like Matt was able to come up with songs that were like, oh, if you like us, check out my new stuff, and that really opened up the
Yeah.
relationship. And then it's not so much a development deal, but they're watching you like rise. Hey, do you want to be in the major leagues? And then like, yeah, check out this tune, check out this tune,
Yeah.
and then the doors are open, and you get your shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that, like, that song was so successful? Everything You Want,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yep. Everything You Want. Yep. It was a big one.
When the country version came around again, and it just hit gold, struck
Well,
out.
that was
again.
a different tune. That was on the same record, but it
Or
was
sorry,
best
yeah.
I ever had. But
Sorry.
both had been singles for us. I
Same
don't think.
same question as like
Yeah,
when that
yeah.
when that came around the second time around. Did you ever think like, holy crap, something I'm a part of? It's not only going to hit once, but hit twice. Like,
I know. That's just the testament. I thought Matt was a great songwriter from the moment I met him. So, and I remember being in a studio when he played me Best I Ever Had. So, you kind of don't think, it's like, well, can you twist it? Can you give it to a different audience and see if they fall for it, fall in love with it the way the rock audience did?
yeah,
But it's kind of a no-brainer when a song is good in the DNA, chords,
Yeah.
melody, lyrics. And so I think even Matt was surprised at how well it did for Jason
Yeah.
Aldean, but it's not really a surprise when you look back at it. But in the moment, I remember going, there's no way, right? You can't have another win from the same song, can you?
yeah,
But it surely worked. And I was delighted for him too.
yeah, super rad. Was it Aldean or was it Gary? I don't know why I thought Gary Allen.
Oh,
I think
right.
it might
Gary
be
Allen. I said
Yeah.
Jason Aldean because a friend of mine's doing front of house for him. Yeah, Gary Allen.
Gary Allen,
So
yeah,
that's foggy though, because that's back to like 2005
like-
or something.
yeah. It's like
Yeah,
almost 90s
Yeah.
version country, but not.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
That's 20
2005
years
or
ago.
so.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Easily. It was.
Yeah.
It's funny. Gary
Who was
Allen.
that?
You're right.
Who was I talking to? It's funny you bring up area codes too, because I remember when I moved out of LA in 98.
Earthquake
And
time?
yeah, it was, they had just finished rebuilding the 14 going down to the 5, because We
All
had
right.
moved from North Hollywood out to Canyon Country. And I remember a buddy of mine telling me, speaking of area codes, he goes, "Oh, you're moving from an 818 to an 805." And I remember him saying, people
Oh,
aren't,
wow.
dude, keep your 818 phone number because nobody's going to call you with an 805.
Yeah.
And at that time, you couldn't keep a phone number if you moved to an
Right.
area, you know.
You were
You had to do
done.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and funny enough, like 805, not that my phone rang that much in 818 either, but it just didn't ring nearly as much in 805
Right.
because it was the
It
end of,
is funny. Yeah.
yeah. So, but man, yeah, 2005. That I was we were reminiscing about last time I was in LA. We were talking about old pizza joints in Laurel Canyon, and he goes, "Yeah, dude." He says that was 30 years ago. I was like, "Wow." Anyways, yeah, I am that old.
Yep.
So, man, again, we all know, we all kind of know your history with Robin and John Mayer, but what eventually was it work that eventually brought you to LA, Sean, or
Yeah, it was just being, Vertical Horizon was just starting to release a record and tour all the time, which all of us musicians know. You're living on a bus or you're homeless. We didn't even
Right.
have a bus in the beginning. It was a van, but it was, put your stuff in storage or bring it to mom's place or bring it to a buddy's garage. And then don't worry about where you live, crash with people on the couple days off or weeks off. And at that time, right when I was homeless and footloose and fancy free at 25 or 26, I met a guitar player in Boston I had been working with. He had a history working with Robin, and he was 20 years older than me. So he knew people long before, he knew Bob Glob. He gave me Bob's number. He introduced me to people. And one day he's like, "Hey, Robin is flying me out to LA from Boston. And he told me to bring a bass player because he just wants to workshop some stuff." So in 99, we released Vertical Horizon in June. And then in September, I started flying out to LA, staying at Robin's house, just workshopping stuff. We weren't even recording into a computer yet. It was still DA-88's, video cassette recorder.
Yeah.
And that got me, meeting people in LA, hanging out in LA. So I would usually tell Robin, "Hey, I'm off, not working on tour with VH from these dates." And so he'd have his manager book me a flight and I would come to LA all the time. And that made it very easy to transition when ultimately Vertical Horizon stopped touring in 2001, that fall. I had met so many people in LA. I was like, great, now I got to get an apartment. I'm going to move to LA. I know engineers. I know players. Robin had stuff that was popping, so I would have work. And I just had a place to put all my energy because I still, there's that crash when you come off the road. If you're working a lot and you don't have the infrastructure because you're younger, well, now what do I do? And I had a place to put it. Robin was very collaborative. We'd play. I met other players. I met John Button around that time. He got me subbing on a gig for him. It just ended up being a great time to move to LA, and also the no pressure because I had been on the road and made some money. I could live here and not be looking for work, but be working with Robin, be settling in and not have to take a job at a coffee shop or something that would. So I had all my hours free to go, oh yeah, I can go there. I can go do that thing, check out Lava Lee, go to the Baked Potato, just immerse myself in the LA community.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a little bit different. It's not easier, but like you say, you kind of had laid down the groundwork prior to you.
It was a lot easier than when I went from Pittsfield to Boston, where I had no money, so I had to get a job. And that kind of, if you're tied up for 8 hours a day, it's tricky. But when I went Boston to LA, I was like, oh, this is very different. I banked some money. I had Robin that was having me work a bit. I didn't really have the studio career had barely even begun, but the concept of it was there. And being able to go, oh, yeah, I can do anything at any time of day because there are no conflicts. Mm-hmm. That made it really easy to see where, hey, let me hang out with this guy, let me play with this guy. If a gig comes up, I say yes, see where it leads, and it made it it was fun. You know, it was a lot less stressful than that move from my hometown to Boston.
Which is funny because, you know, Pittsfield to Boston, I mean, it's still
yeah, right. It's a car ride, 2 hour
it's a car ride. But but then Boston to LA is, you know, across the country. And this was what year would you say this was? Early 2000s?
Yeah, when it felt like this weird amorphous time period, because meeting Robin in 99, by the time the tour ended, it wasn't until September of 2001 that I was living in LA. So I had been sort of creeping up on it for several years, because depending on how long a tour break would be, I might have already spent 2 weeks in LA just kind of living the life I was prepared to live when the tour, all right, it's officially over. 2001, boom, I hit the ground running, you know, no tour, no nothing, just see what happens.
Yeah, man. I was long gone from
you were
LA
gone.
at that point. Yep. Man, we never even had a chance to cross paths, you know.
Crazy.
But it's funny. It's funny you bring up John. John's been a guest on here a couple of times, dear friend of ours. In fact, John, he's another dude that like brought what year was his P bass that he brought out to California?
I think it was a 63. It was early 60s for sure.
Yeah, I would guess 62, 63 or so.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, you know, he hands it to Dom and I, and it plays like, as we say here in Boston, it played like bada. You know,
exactly.
Yeah.
If you get a good one, man, it's amazing.
He also had that cat bass that was so cool.
Yeah.
He
loves it.
Yeah.
Is it, you know, and I know this is kind of a weird question, but as a working cat in LA or New York, is this an important thing to have in your toolbox, an old vintage P bass?
Well, I'm pretty sure John didn't have one when he moved. Well, maybe he did. I saw John playing a Lakeland when he was first in town. I was playing a Lakeland. I didn't have one.
Yeah.
So I got one. I called up Fender because I was working the phones and Vertical Horizon had a hit. So I got a 63 or 62 reissue, it was called, in 2000. I got that. So I had a Sunburst P bass, but I had a vintage jazz bass that I would bring out. I didn't quite have my calibration dialed in for, you know, what sound am I really going for? Because in Vertical Horizon, I had to have the 5-string tuned down a half step to play. And then with Robin, I was using my Epiphone Jack Cassidy with flat wounds. I would leave it at his house.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out because I didn't have enough basses to have a bass that was always in flat wounds until I got that Epiphone. I was like, oh, I can always have flat wounds on that because now I have 4 basses.
Sure.
You know, and it was also a different time in music, so the expectation wasn't what it is now. Now I'd say I've been saying it for 10 years, like, or even longer. Like when you walk in the room, if you don't have a P bass, even if it's a reissue custom shop, like it has to look like the sound that they're expecting. Then you can pull out a different bass, cat bass, you know, a Guild, Starfire, whatever. It's just good to have. It's like it'd be if a drummer didn't have a great middle of the road snare drum that works on everything. Like if he's like, oh yeah, I have this real deep one and then a piccolo. You're like, yeah, but you don't have, even if it's not what we want on every single song.
Yeah.
If you don't show it as like, well, it's always here if we need it. Okay, let's get tweaky. Let's play the Hagstrom. Let's do the harmony, whatever. But when I first showed up, we were all of us, like Billy Moeller was playing a Fodera. John and I both had Lakelands. Like we were working all the time. Nobody blinked an eye. It was probably like then right around that time, Voodoo comes out. Pino, who I had known as the fretless Music Man guy, see him on the cover of magazines growing up, aspiring to that. Suddenly it's like he's always playing a P bass with flats, and then you listen to Voodoo, And like, okay. And then things just, well, like Jamerson had always been playing a P bass with flats. I learned the Jamerson book when I was a kid, but I was playing it on an Ibanez, and I was like, no, I don't sound anything like it. So you start to take in the information. And I think we were searching. Mason brought up something when I met Matt Scannell in Vertical Horizon. He told me about Michael Landau and Michael Thompson and all these guitar players I didn't know about. And he told me about, they use Bob Bradshaw and they use these rigs and all this stuff. And there was a sort of underground community that was sharing, this is the gear that your favorite records were made with. This is the gear that these guitar players use. This is the signal processing. This is, stereo miking. And so I started to get my antenna up of like, just because it wasn't available in Pittsfield and I didn't come across it, doesn't mean I shouldn't be hunting out, like, what don't I have to get the sound? And then naturally I hit a wall of frustration of, I like the way I sound in the studio. And then I get into a room with an active bass and a tweeter in the speaker. And like, I don't sound like I wish I did. And then the hunt leads you. But now everything is like, if you show up now all the information's out there. So it's a choice. If you don't want to be regular Joe player, then maybe you don't want to have a P bass. But if you want to be someone that everyone can rely on, walk into a room full of strangers. I've met a lot of producers that go, okay, phew. When they see like, okay, the instrument I want to see. And I heard the same story from a guy from it's an English group. I'm blanking on it. And Florence and the Machine. I hung out with their bass player, and he said, even on a second or third record, he worked with a different producer who said, I know you love your jazz bass, but guess what? You're playing a P bass on this record. And he resisted a little bit. And then by the end of the process, he's like, it just sounded so much better for the music and blah, blah, blah. He went through the same journey that I kind of did, because I was chasing jazz basses in Boston. I called up Anthony Vitti, who was like the jazz bass guru. He gave me the whole rundown. And the first vintage bass I brought out with me, I bought when I got some, $1,500 for my Vertical Horizon winnings. I bought a '69 jazz bass for $1,500.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. And just as far as any bass universally sitting in a mix, you can't beat a P bass. It's just something in those mids that just,
like you say, even the fact that, an engineer or producer sees you coming into the session with a P bass, lets them know that
it's your little ID card of like, I can get in anywhere.
I've been here before. I've done this.
We may never use this. You may want me to play my 5-string Federa, but this is at least that I know I need to have it.
Right.
Yeah. Apparently, I love Steve Cook's comment. What's up, Steve?
I knew Steve back then when he had the Warwick.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, man, so and Steve's been a guest on here as well. I know we've talked about this plenty of times, and Steve is actually a Noble user like yourself as well. So we'll get into that a little bit too if we have time. But it's all it's we all come from that. We all want the nice fit or the nice custom made bass or the handmade or as Matt Ferguson calls my coffee table basses. That sort of thing. But it's funny. Like here I go again with the weatherman report.
You're getting better. It's pretty good.
I'm getting better at it. So the funny story, this bass here it was owned by David Rowe. Now, David from Nashville. So Dave and I would talk all the time. When I say all the time, like once a month, we would keep in touch. And he told me, he says, Dino, you got to get your hand on a 59 P bass or a 62 P bass. I was like, well, can you keep an eye open for me? No problem. So once a month, Dave would send me a link of a bass, whatever. And I'd look up the prices like, oh, Dave, I really can't afford that. And he did this like 3 times. And then finally he calls me up. He goes, listen, and infamous Dave Rowe, he's listen, I've got a Mexican road worn that I'm going to sell you for dirt cheap. so that you will stop asking me to keep an eye open for vintage basses, because
Right.
I'm finding all these great basses for you, man. He says, and you're not buying them. I end up buying them. He says, so I'm going broke looking for basses for you. He says, so we're going to put an end to this. I'm just going to sell you something that you can afford right now. and this has been, you know, it's kind of been a workhorse for me. And, you know,
I will say, like, you do the best with what you have. You know, it just, if you ever hit a roadblock like I did, you either learn from it or you just bang your head, and you know, it's on you if you fail. Like, if you don't end up where you want to be, that's your choice. But I hit these roadblocks, and I remember being devastated when a local Boston player, he wasn't even trying to say anything negative about me, but I had this, you know, coffee table looking PJ Fender precision bass 40th anniversary, gold hardware, ebony fingerboard, no dots on the front. I thought I had done it right. I bought it in 1993. I was still living at home. I was like 19. And I'm running around Boston playing it. And my friend, you know, the guy referred to me as, oh, yeah, Sean loves his P-Bass Lite. And I was like, wait, that's not how I identified what. Right. No,
you little P-Bass. It's like one of those comments.
Right. When he was playing a 5-string, you know, Ernie Ball, Music Man, like I know he wasn't trying to disparage me, but I was on the edge of going, well, wait a minute. If that's how people see me, and, you know, it was just kind of out of like, I only owned 2 basses and the other one was a fretless Music Man. So I ended up doing what you did, Dino. I bought, a friend of mine said, hey, they're coming out with jazz basses made in Japan. They're going to be amazing. And they're $300. They're never going to last that long. At some point, they're going to make them more expensive, but go buy one right away. It was like a 70s looking one. So I bought that and I started bringing that on my gigs. And I felt a little more like, okay, this is the place. Like, I would be jazz bass Sean as opposed to P-Bass Lite, you know, with gold tuners and all that. And then it just sets you on the path. Like, if you love the things you love, then stick with it. I was hunting for a particular recipe that got me into more doors open than more doors closed. And I would hear a little bit of advice, and it's on me or you to take it or leave it. But I decided to take it, and again, I was unhappy with my sound. I liked the way I was playing, but I was learning how to interact with a studio. You know, I had never played through a pre into an LA2A coming out of NS10s until I showed up at Robin's place. And I was like, oh, I like the way, okay. You know, you start to learn, because prior to that, all I knew how to do was plug into an amp. And I was, you know, a victim of the circumstances. Like, at one point I copied my bass teacher lovingly, willingly, and I had a GK head and a Hartke cab 410, and like, that's not the sound I'm trying to get now. I even had a Alesis MIDI verb rack thing. Like, I just literally copied what he had. I was putting effects on myself. I had a 5-string Ibanez with a high C on it.
Wow.
I was exploring everything that was available to me. And I was learning what, you know, it's nice to have higher notes. I was like, I don't need lower notes. I need higher notes to learn how to solo and play chords and learn what was above the bass clef, you know? So,
wow.
But again, it's all of the time. It's like, that's why I prefer if people simmer down now and don't try to become a phenom at age 13, because if anything, I was not capable of it. But if I had any eyes of the world on me at 13, 14, I'd be fighting my whole life to go, well, I that's not what I'm feeling currently. And I've been able to, like, I've got my shit together early on in my LA career. So the 24, 23 years I've been being the me that is most comfortable me, it's all been like, nobody even knows that I didn't have a P bass.
Right.
For the most part, because I met people 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I was already 10 years into my journey of like, okay, I figured it out. 10 years in. And then it's, oh, yeah, I met this new guy, Sean. Oh, he's a P-bass guru. Like, well, I wasn't. Now I'm getting to the place where it's been more years of who I am now than it was of the guy who used to be.
Yeah. It's so funny too, like with if you need to play anything else and you're like, no, but I'm typically a P bass guy, like because I'm cutting the back half of the Callings new record right now, and very similar thing to Vertical Horizon, where it's like 5-string drop, half step, and it's like messing with me so much. And this last tour I went out with Ernie Ball 5, and I'm like the whole time I'm just like, but I'm a P bass guy, like what's that gonna say about me? But it was right for the gig though. It was you know,
whatever it takes.
Your balls.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I had a lot of my studio friends that I had made, like, oh my God, these are my people. Like I'd met them in early 2000, and I was learning a lot from what they were seeing because they were working with other people. So I was getting, all right, I'm going to, I bought my 59 P bass as well. I started to get the arsenal together. And every once in a while, something would come up like, I got to pull out the 5-string. And even those guys would razz me. And it's like, we're just in the studio. No one's going to see it. But there's a low D and a low C sharp. Like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And I don't do it. There's no shame for me. But it's still, it depends on what room you're in. People can go. And there have been times when, it's not often for me, but if I go in and play something vintagey, when that's not what they want, then I have to account for that. I got to pull out something different, something active or whatever. And it can go both ways, but it tends to be, when I talked to Bob Glaub on the phone in like 2000, he was kind, that's who I modeled myself after, Dom, when I saw you at the club. Like, he just answered the phone, was super nice to me. He's got 2 of every classic bass, and every time I'd ask him, like, hey, do you have a Gibson Les Paul signature? Oh yeah, I got 2. Do you have? Oh yeah, I got 2 59s, 2 63s. It's like, okay, there's something to it. Like, Bob is very much recorded, very much relied upon to be the kind of bass player that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like, great. And again, I know me and a lot of other guys were looking at Pino when he made a commitment to be like, I play a P bass with flats. It's like, well, I would rather be like him than not. So I'm going to take the hint. Other people do not want to follow in his footsteps and be a sideman, and that's totally valid. But my happiest place is like next to a great drummer backing up a great artist. And that's P Bassville.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Who was it that they had the perfect Bob Glaub quote? Was it last week or the week? I forget who we were talking.
I think it was like 2 ago. I'm trying to remember.
You know what? It was Curtis Kieber.
Okay.
Had said he was talking with Bob, and he said Bob said something like, I'm going to screw it up, but it was something like, I'm the plumber in the band. Like,
right.
I've heard that. I shouldn't be seen. Like,
I don't want to be seen. I just want to be like, know when I'm here. Like something like really deep, but it was total Bob. And he said it in Bob's voice too. So like he has the Bob Glaub impersonation down. But
Bob has done a good thing for us all. Like, I'm 51 now. I'm sure he was younger than me when we first spoke, but we've all come up as like the sons of Bob Glaub. He framed it up for us. And now, guys 20 years younger than me are still doing it the Bob way.
We saw Bob. You'll get a kick out of this. He came to Boston with Jackson Brown a couple of years ago, and myself and Danny Morris, Danny Moe.
Oh
from
yeah,
Berkeley.
yeah.
One of the finest.
Who's another P bass guy. The 2 of us went to go see the show, and we were just like, every time Bob would play something, we'd look at each other like,
that's it.
Like he took us to school every single time, So anyways, it's I think we all have that in us to some degree, Hey, let's I know we're going to get long-winded here, so I want to show this video.
We already did.
Quick.
Mission accomplished.
No, right. I know. What happens when you put 3 bass players in a room and start talking about P basses and now B15s?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can share my screen here. without divulging too much on my screen.
Yeah, keep it clean, baby.
Select the tab, entire screen window. Yeah, okay. So here's what I'm going to share. And this is just a clip from the Vertex effects video that you did where you talked about your B15.
If we have audio.
I could do voiceover. Blah, 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 blah. John Mayer, blah, blah, blah. B15, plug in. I use it on every recording, so that's basically all I'm saying.
Dino, do you have
that footage of the studio one? I went to that studio, and they had a B15 there, so I didn't have to bring mine in.
I'm sure you're hearing audio, Dino, but we are not.
Oh, you're not hearing audio?
No audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was assuming you were hearing audio. Well, it sounded really good, I will say that.
You looked really pleased and fascinated.
Yeah. Here I am thinking, oh, you guys are like commenting on what's going on here.
Sean's just he's that seasoned. He knows he's like, we need to fill the gaps here.
I'm looking at the random navy blue and the random flare, navy flare. What brought you to B15s? I know, and I think I know where the answer lies here too.
Yeah, I approached the career path of whatever I don't know, tend to talk less and listen more. So Vertical Horizon I joined, and my spot is so fresh in the band. They already have their deal. I have no part of their success yet. So I'm just there to, do it right and don't get in the way. And you can be on a winning team. It's like joining a winning team in their championship season, potentially. So I'm there to go, all right, I've never really worked with a producer before. Whatever he asks of me, hopefully, I've read all the articles and kind of prepared for it. And we ended up working with two different producers. And the first one was not too critical of anything I was doing sonically. And in fact, he was like complimentary, but I was playing things a little closer to, hey, Matt recorded all these demos. So I was just taking what he did and putting it through my hands. I did a lot of stuff with a pick, a lot less of fewer notes, just super supportive. Then we were a little unhappy, as often happens. Like first time you're making a record in a particular way with a different budget, we said, okay, we want to revisit like 8 of the 11 songs, and mostly in the rhythm section. The drummer kind of raised the flag and said, hey, we're missing something. There's some groove missing. So I got a chance to recut a ton of stuff. And while I played the same Lakeland that I was using, we were working with a producer who had just come off of working and engineering Fiona Apple's first record, which, if you guys remember, is like everyone was digging it. It was a lot more earthy. There's a lot of compression on the drums. And so I did not have a B15 at the time. I brought my amp down to Water Music in Hoboken, and the engineer, Mark Endert, was like, okay, cool. I'm going to rent a B15. And he brought in, I think it was a B18 ultimately was the only thing available, but it gave us the same thing where like it was low volume. It was more harmonically rich than my, tube pre-solid state through my speakers with the horn.
Yeah.
And that was my first taste. So I finally was like, oh, this is producer bona fide, it's verified by him. I sat in front of it and got a taste of like, because you never bring a small amp to a gig. As a bass player, we're always overpowered. So you got to go bigger, more wattage. And I had not had the opportunity. I did not. Anytime I recorded previous to that, we tended to just do DI because we were in smaller home studios without the ISO for the bass amp. Then I got my taste of, okay, this is what the producer is looking for. I like it. When someone guides you to something and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So I got my first taste. And then after that, it was just, I was like, okay, I've heard about all the P-bass stuff. I've heard about all the pairing with a B15. Let me track these things down for myself. Right around that time, Ampeg was launching the reissue B15 in 2000 or so. So I bought one of those. I tracked down a vintage one, and I just liked having access to, like, let me get familiar with these tones. And then I started just having success. It's like when you're new in town and someone recommends you and a producer calls or someone says, hey, what are you going to bring? And you tell them, I'll bring a P bass and a B15. They're like, great. See you on Thursday.
Yeah.
And that's just the commitment I made. And it was truly on the job training, because I did not, I'm not sure that would happen. I guess if you're in a band, they'll bring you in. But, nowadays, if you are the guy who's not going to bring what I'm going to bring, they might just call me instead.
True. Very true. Yeah.
So I had the luxury to learn, because I was in the band. So I came with the package and I was able to learn, okay, they didn't just ditch me and hire Tony Levin or whoever was local and available. They said, all right, we're going to instruct you bit by bit of how to be in the recording business. Because we were going to tape. Like, the playing was the first thing to pass the test. But then if you can play and you get your sonics right, you get some wins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And fortunately, it's like you said, you were like kind of learning on the job with the B15. That's the best thing about that amp, is like you can't screw it up, really. It's like
I have yet to screw it up.
It's so frills, and it's anything you do is going to work. Like,
it's so
some guys are like, crank it up. I want some dirt. I play it loud, play it soft. It's always cool.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like the Geico commercial. It's so easy, even a bass player can figure it out.
Indeed.
But it's funny because I remember back then, like when I was in LA from like most of the 90s, and the rig du jour back then was an SWR with a 410 Goliath cab and
absolutely
and a Tobias bass. That was whereas coming from Boston, like you were saying, Sean, Boston and New York, it was a GK 800 on top of an Harkey cab. That was the city rig,
Yep.
So, unless you were in the know in the studios, because you would never see anybody gigging out with a B15. They were all reserved for the studios,
Yep.
And I think another important point that we as bass players need to kind of put aside. Now, this excludes you guys, but anybody that's listening is, and forgive me for saying this, but put your endorsements aside.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think like, hey, I'm an Ampeg endorser, or I'm this, or I use this brand that, I have to use this in the studio because this is my brand. Like you say, the producer says, no, I want you playing this P bass with this B15 that has a set of labella flats on it. And that's the sound that you got to kind of put all your other bullshit aside and just get that sound,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
if you want to be on the team, exactly. If you're open, my wife is into therapy. She's a therapist, so she peppers me with these things. We raise kids. Like, if you're in a growth mindset, which is kind of my takeaway from living in that world or just living next to that world, then you'll always be. It's like, do the comedy thing. Yes, and like I have never successfully resisted my way to success. It's always okay, let me try it your way. Because I'm not making my solo record. Now, if we're making the Dino solo record, guess what? That's when you, the bass player, can tell us what you're going to record through. But unless it's your name and face that's going on the cover of that CD, you are not in charge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
You might
have even for this record, I'm working with John Fields. He says hi, by the way. He's going to come in a second, I think.
We love John Fields.
He's a great bassist in his own right.
I know,
too.
right? Like, when you work for a bass player, you got to get it right.
And he's also like not going to waste time on anything. So if there's like the slightest thing not working, just like try this, and it's like you can't be precious about anything.
No, I know that's what is like. If you play with other people enough, you learn, like, don't worry about it. It's not about you. It's not going to stick to you unless you're a jerk about something. Everything is, you can solve any problem. But if you dig in your heels and you're not fun to work with, that's when the losses stack up. But it's like, you think gear will fail, mistakes will be made. We will play a wrong note somehow. But if you've lived with these people, even just for the day, if you've cultivated the kindness that everyone deserves and the openness to like, we don't know what this is yet. We're creating music together, even if it's just you coming into play for the person that's recording you. Like, there's already teamwork involved. It's not your job, and it's no musicians, no instrument. It's like, unless you're the lead singer, everything tends to blend in together. So the better you are at that, that's just kind of job security, being helping you build your career around people that want to help you get to the next thing, because not everything is going to be a win in a great way, but each thing can propel us forward.
Yeah Perfect advice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you when speaking of working in a teamwork, and I'll cut this short, but when you're recording tracks for somebody like, say, Robin or John or any session, do you like to hear the song complete before you put your bass line in? Or
absolutely, yeah. I just like music, and I like to be part of the song versus just, because there are times you go, hey, you're not going to come in until the second verse, so blah blah blah, and I'm like, at least the first take, let me hear it from the beginning. I also need to know what chords I'm going to play. So usually I'm like, hey, let me hear the whole thing so I can hear the shape. And there was a time just this week, might have been, no, because it's only Tuesday. So it was last week. I was working with somebody, and we did a couple takes where we just came in on verse 2, played it 2 bars ahead. And then as we were enjoying ourselves, like, all right, let's start it from the beginning and just see what it feels like. I'm still going to come in at the same place later in the tune. And he commented, like, you played a little differently. It felt different when we listened to the whole song. Your approach changed from the other takes where we were just trying to carve out, like, okay, we need you here, we need you there, movement there, whole note there. And I was like, man, I love music. So the more I hear of it, the better informed I'll be, the better I would be to inhabit. And I love listening. Usually it's like you only listen once and then you start jumping into it. But each time I'm doing a take, I'm listening to the whole song to go, what am I adding? And it's can I add something or can I subtract something? Sometimes laying out after you've played something can be very effective. Like, ooh, we carry so much weight, and we always, think of it like, oh, we're just the dummy of the group. But if you play it smart, you can be the smartest dummy out there on the field. And it's just amazing.
Yeah.
As Steve Bailey used to say, dumb as a fox.
Yeah.
But no, the reason why I asked that too is because there's been, obviously sessions that I've been on, and people send me tracks to record bass on here too. But a lot of times, like, you'll get a drum track, a scratch guitar track, maybe a little bit of keyboards,
right?
And if you're lucky, you'll get a scratch vocal track,
right?
It's like, okay, how do you, like, okay, if you just want dunk, like, if you want just a generic bass line, but if you want me to add something, I get to hear the whole composition. I get to hear what the vocals are doing, or these little flourishes that the keyboard player may be doing that we can play off of.
It can be frustrating to know that you're coming in so early in the process that it's like, and that's when you have to be smart and go. I often go, well, if this isn't going to be about me, then I'm going to give you real simple stuff that you can add so much to. Because if I step out and you don't want me there, you got to have a fallback position. In my first take, it's like, I'm going to give you something that just lays so low, because if you don't have all your melodies in there, you don't have all your background vocals or any of that stuff. So, but I get a lot of that, and I just have to use my imagination and, the training of, like, I've framed up so many houses that went on to be built in these beautiful estates, but I was not part of the drywall and the painting and the roofing. But I have to know, it's like, if my lines are straight, And I have to counsel people. You don't want me to do that. Like, I'll do it because what's a take to me? I don't care. We got, we're not on tape anymore. I'll give you 1,000 takes, but I'm pretty sure you don't want me to do that because it's going to prohibit you from doing anything with that 2 beats because I just clobbered whoever else was going to come in.
Yeah. It's a good point, though, when you're doing at-home work and sending stuff in. I always do try to send a super basic pass as a take and then a super fancy, and then they can kind of comp whatever they want from that. But
that's great advice. That is great advice.
Just to give them like that extra option.
Yeah, I always tell them, hey, if you're looking for more, it'll be a later take. If you're looking for, we need like, I need a note. I can't mute you, but we got to be like minimal, whatever. You know, the simplest path through, that'll be take 1 because I don't want people searching for, the bass got too busy. I thought, but I regret it later.
Yeah. Man, that's great advice. Thank you. We're at the top of the hour, and I know I don't want to keep you guys. I got nothing else going on here. I'm sequestered down in my basement here with all my toys. So,
well, house arrest is like that, right? I mean, you're not even allowed.
When my wife sends me to my room at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I'll be down. I'll be down in the studio. Go to your room.
I don't want to see you for 10 hours.
oh man. But no, seriously, Sean, thank you. I know I had thrown this out to you last week, like, hey, by the way, we're working with Vertex on this video, and
I appreciate that too,
dude. I remember Mason had text. Well, we were in a meeting with Mason, and he said, hey, he says, maybe, I was mentioning the SVT time and the 75th, and he said, why don't you text Sean and see if he might be interested in joining you. I was like, I know Sean's really busy and I don't want to bother the guy. I know he's just coming off the Vertex. But then I was like, you know what? I think I know Sean well enough to just kind of say, listen, if you can do it, great. No pressure.
No pressure.
And when I saw your text last night, I was like, awesome.
We got it. We got him.
We got him. No, but man, thank you.
Long overdue. I long overdue. Finally, I think that I'm able to get everything, like the more work I do from home, which tends to be a lot, I can now pace myself. And as I do, it's like every year I get better at doing my gig because I do want to chat with my friends, take the dog for a walk, play on as many songs as come across my desk, and having these fun times. Like, even though I'm still at home, it feels like I've left. And I'm interacting with people, which is great because there are some weeks the car doesn't leave the garage and I'm still playing. I just finished up playing on 11 songs for a guy in Sweden and I had a blast, but it's like, 11 songs from home it takes me more days than if I went to a studio. Like Dom, you could probably do 11 songs in 2 days because you're
making all the decisions with people.
Yeah, it's all happening.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, we're doing a little back and forth. And so I was in tunnel vision over 4 days. I was doing those songs. Plus I had other work to do. They all came in at once. So I was like, oh, I just came out of my studio week and now I'm here hanging with the SVT time bros.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you could see the comments on the side, but like everybody came out of the woodwork today.
Yeah, we got Mark Pacificar here too, which is great.
Who's been on as well, and Juan Aldorete chimed in a little while ago.
All the best guys.
Yeah. But and of course, we can't have an SVT time without mentioning Ray Chu and Paul and all the guys over in the UK and Europe, and it's like this is like Dom. I truly look forward to doing these. Like when Dom and I get together, and it's just Dom and I look forward to that too because we talk about gear and what's going on with Ampeg. But when we have a guest on, it's just like
it's the highlight. It really is.
Because I mean, obviously we pick your brain for our own selfish reasons too. But but we love having these. How often do you get to sit down on a gig and talk with another bass player?
Never.
Never.
I was just talking to someone else about it. We were talking about so I played with a drummer who plays with Curtis, and I was like, hey, I never get to hang with him. I've seen him at a club. We talked and we exchanged pleasantries, but like I'll talk to drummers, I talk to guitar players. I'm like, man, I gotta talk to Kurt. I used to be in the clubs more, so I've done my time with Button. I've done my time with some of the older cats, but it's guys 10, 15 years younger than me. Like, man, I want to. So picking people's brains, reading some comments is like, all right, we're all connected to the source, the geek source of the simple bass and amp and how the heck it all works and fires us up.
Yeah, man. And other than NAMM, we don't get it. Yeah. And NAMM is impossible to have a conversation because you're getting pulled in so many different directions. So, well, listen, before we split, I have a quick 11, I may even be up to 12 questions now. Just quick rapid fire.
Great.
Whatever comes to mind first.
He says quick, but it's going to
it's multiple choice though.
It's going to force you to choose your identity.
It is multiple choice. But again, all right. So question number 1, P bass or jazz bass?
P bass.
Number 2, passive or active?
Passive.
Number 3, round or flat?
I'm going to say flat.
Okay. Number 4, B15 or SVT?
B15.
Okay. Number 5, cable or wireless?
Cable.
Okay. Number 6, pick or fingers?
Fingers.
Okay. Number 7, in-ear monitors or floor wedges?
Gotta go with the floor wedges, Bob.
Man.
Nice.
Number 8, pedals or no pedals?
I say no pedals.
Okay. Number 9, here's a curveball. Window or aisle?
Always aisle.
And this determines where number 10 goes. High bunk or low bunk?
I'm going high bunk.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And there's a reason we'll get back to that in a minute. But number 10, black with white piping or silver and blue? Talking Ampeg.
Right. Silver and blue.
Okay. Another curveball here. Number 12, hot chocolate or coffee?
Coffee. Always.
Okay. And number 13, favorite place to eat while on the road?
My hotel room.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. That's it.
That's actually the quickest round I think we've had.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Because that's just it. Like everybody kind of says, well, it all depends on the situation when it comes to flats or rounds, or
totally.
Of course, this is like stranded on a desert island.
Yeah, exactly. I've had this conversation with several people that I know well, but not well enough to go. I do the final explanation of if someone says just, hey, Sean, show up and play bass with us on whatever, and it's not about money. It's just like we want to hang out together and play. I just bring my one flat wound P bass. Yeah, like that's the bass I want to play. No one has a say in the matter because we're just coming together as friends, and I'm doing my thing.
I was going to say that was one of the questions I was going to ask earlier. Is like you're on your way out the door to jam at the write-off room. Which bass are you taking? You know,
and I'll do it. It's this guy.
Yeah.
I started bringing it, and I remember the first time I had to make the decision. I was filling in for Yannick Gwizdala, who we all know is one of the finest musicians, let alone bass player.
Yep.
And he plays with his buddy Bob Reynolds. They went to Berkeley together. I met Bob, sax player, who he was on the road with Mayer, so we got to hang. We loved hanging out together. And he's like, "Hey, I'm playing a gig at the Baked Potato. Yannick can't do it. And I'm going to mix it up because I'm not the fusion guy. I tend to not, like, please don't make me solo." But he said, let's do it. We had just spent tons of time on the road together, love each other's company. And I was sitting there going, you don't fill in for Yannick. trying to be Yannick, because that's
Yeah.
going to be a swing and a miss. And I don't, but I was like, what bass do I bring? And this is like 2012 or something. Like, you know what? I'm going to bring my P bass with flat wounds. I brought my SVT head because I know they have house gear, but I was like, they don't have an all tube SVT. I'm going to bring the head, bring the bass, and I'm just going to let it rip in my own style. And Bob loved it. And I was like, wow, I can truly be myself in any situation, not just the situation kind of tailor made for me, but actually any situation. Like, all right, that was a big one. Like, you know what? Every time heretofore that someone says, Sean, I choose you to show up and play, then I can bring my P bass with flats.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. We're gonna end the conversation right there. Couldn't get any more perfect. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna put the link to the Vertex Effects video back up. Anybody watching this video, please go watch this. And you can watch it in segments. You can watch it in its entirety. You can put it up on your screen while you're jamming or practicing or doing whatever and just listen to it in the background. There is an absolute wealth of information. I applaud Mason and Vertex for doing this. And I think they're going to do more videos of this kind of series where they really get into picking apart songs. And again, can't say enough, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
Happy birthday, Ampeg.
Yeah, happy birthday, Ampeg. It is our 75th anniversary again, or there's so many different anniversaries, but it is our 75th anniversary. We are back in 2 weeks. I'll get all that up after. I think we have Alex Shernett coming from Megan Maroney's band in 2 weeks.
Cool.
But anyways, just keep an eye on the posts on the Facebook and YouTube and advertisements. And thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Sean.
Peace.
See you guys.